The story begins with a powerful warrior hitting a monster with a bludgeon and defeating it easily. The scene cuts to a guild of adventurers where that same warrior enters to receive payment for having completed a mission. The receptionist thinks he has given up the request to collect some rare flowers, but the warrior called Yuji shows that he collected a huge amount, so big that the receptionist gets scared and calls the guild owner. The people in the background are surprised, wondering how he got so many, being just a tamer. A man enters scared, warning everyone about an hour of monsters having been seen in the forest and communicating with his slimes. Yuji discovers that there were 10,000 and they were coming towards the city where he was. The guild owner tells them to leave the city, but they say they would not abandon the people there. Desperate Yuji says he had an idea, and after taking a bone from inside one of his slimes, he tells everyone that that was a dragon bone and he could make that bone turn into a flame of dragon that he would use to end all the monsters. The scene cuts showing the adventurers drinking a potion made with the flowers that Yuji brought and preparing for battle. Yuji sends his wolf to get his slime scattered around, and the scene cuts with the adventurers throwing bombs that explode with the arrows of the archers, making crystals fall on the heads of the monsters. However, this is not enough to stop them and the battle becomes hand-to-hand. Yuji climbs to a high place overlooking the sea battlefield and opens a screen that showed his statistics and spells he had. He explains that he was trying to find an angle to kill all the monsters without affecting the city, and a girl arrives where he was and hides watching him. The scene cuts with a familiar of him on top of a tree in the forest, telling him that there was a strange man holding a magic stone down. He says that the monsters must have come out of that stone and makes a scheme with his slimes to attack him again, surprise, and deactivate the stone, and that's what happened. However, this man says something strange and just commits sway. Yeah, you know the rest. The adventurers were having trouble holding the monsters, so Yuji teleports his slimes there and uses what he calls magic transfer to pass magic to the slime, thus allowing them to launch fireballs and help in battle. After thinking a little, he has the idea of creating a barrier around the city and launching this one powerful magic out of her, thus evaporating everything outside the barrier, eliminating the monster. He tells the girl watching him warn all adventurers to enter the city because of Yuji's barrier. However, two of them stay outside to hold a giant monster while the Yuji prepared the barrier. Their plan was to hold the monster as long as possible, even knowing that they would be outside the barrier and would be affected by the explosion. Despite the heroic intention, this ends up not being necessary because Yuji's wolf snatches the monster by surprise in the neck, thus defeating him. He then takes the two into the city and Yuji form the barrier covering the whole city, which leaves General impressed and saying that he could not be just a simple summoner. He then explodes everything around the barrier like this, evaporating all the monsters. He then staggers for the second he has used a little life to be able to cast such a powerful spell, and soon he notices that some monsters survive, and to finish them all off once and for all, he decides to use this powerful attack that sucks his life once again, even the girl called Lily warning him not to use it because it could be bad for him. After using it, he faints and wakes up comfortably in a bed, showing that the battle is over. Lily says that everyone was very happy and she didn't know, like thanking him for protecting a city he didn't even know. Right at that moment, a flashback happens showing his past life where he worked until exhaustion in a technology company. He smiles when he realizes that he is in a much better situation, and when Lily comes back without her room bringing an extra blanket, she sees that he's gone. The scene cuts with Lily talking to the owner of the Adventurers Guild and warning about Yuji having run away. She notices something on the table and he says he found it this next to a fallen man in the forest along with a deactivated magic stone. In this case, it was that man that Yuji's slimes defeat, and he says that this must be something from the cult that he heard about. In the background, a slime from Yuji was watching the conversation, showing that he heard everything. The first episode ends with him and his companions arriving in a new city. The scene cuts with a suspicious vein planning something in this city. Yuji and his slimes arrive in the city dead of hunger, and he stops at a meat stall asking for the biggest piece that the seller had and giving it to his slimes to eat. While everyone was enjoying his food, they hear a bell ringing, and the vendor at the stall explains that it was to let everyone know that the service in the church was started, and he also says that a high priest from the central was giving the service. When he hears the word central, he remembers who heard the owner of the Adventurers Guild in the other city talk about it before. The scene cuts with him registering as an adventurer. He is initially denied, but when they see that he has the ability to track monsters, they allow him to enter the guild without question. A group approaches him after noting that he had no partners and invites him to join them. He accepts and says that he is a tracker which activates a prejudice in the group. Combat specialist called Lotus, thinking that he would be a dead weight for not know how to fight, but the girls in the group defend him, saying that if he didn't accept Yuji in the group, he would be kicked out. While confronting him, they mention that whenever he's in a group, several people from the group disappear. Now, why the hell they let him join the group knowing that, I don't know. Before leaving, they review the mission, which was to locate the great white dragon, and after that they go action. The group thought that Yuji was weak and only served to locate monsters, so they let him in a position where he wouldn't need to fight. Who was doing the work of tracking monsters were his monsters that communicate to Yuji the location of a horde of wolves, and he warns the group about the danger. Excited to see if Yuji was right, Lotus go ahead running, and when they get there they face this horde. In an impulse, Yuji thinks about attacking, but he doesn't even have to because Lotus easily finishes with the wolf. He turns to Yuji and says he changed his mind about them. Slimes, they say they could easily finish off the wolves, but Yuji replies that it's important to know the strength of your companions. The scene cuts with them camping for the night. Lotus divides everyone into turns, with him and Yuji being second and third. Third because it was the most propitious time for them to be attacked. Yuji has a dream of when he came to this world, found the first slime and tamed it, thus being taken to a strange house full of books that by reading he gained all the absurd powers he has today, in addition to having found the other slimes that were all there for some reason. After that he wakes up and his slimes warn him that everyone in his group is gone. He uses his slimes to find out what was happening and listens to the two girls called Tina and Lisa who were following him, said that they suspected him since he set the shift for each because he wasn't one to worry about the safety of others like that. He arrives at a suspicious tent, and when entering, that same one came that we saw back there asks what he got this time, and he answers two girls who will give a good price and a guy. And he continues saying he would do the usual thing, which is to notify the Guild of Adventurers that his group disappeared out of nowhere. That explains the disappearance of members of other groups he formed. The anime doesn't explain it well, but from what I understand, this organization kidnaps adventurers and sells them or takes them somewhere. There's no way to know why the anime simply doesn't say what they do with. I just know that Lotus had set up sound traps to hear when the two got there, and what he thought was them stepping on the trap was just a monster that, because it looked dangerous, made everyone stay back inside the hut. In fact, it wasn't a monster, and yes, Yuji's mascot monsters who cast an ice spell in the hut, freezing everyone inside and ending the antics of that group. He then captures the vein that they recognize as being a wanted criminal, and that was worth a good amount of reward. They thought that it would not be possible to continue the mission because they were one less, but Yuji says that with their slimes it was possible to avoid most confrontations with monsters and go on smoothly. The scene cuts with them camping, and Yuji remembering something that came to him said before about a blue moon of salvation, saying that a disaster would happen when the moon turns blue or something, and Yuji assumes that blue moon of salvation must have been behind the attack on the city he saved in the beginning from the anime, and looking at the moon that was purple he wonders what calamity this was. The scene cuts with the three still looking for the dragon. The two girls feel a strong breeze and say it must have come from the Valley of the Wind. This name surprises Yuji, and they explain that according to legends these strong breezes coming from there are the breath of the earth dragon. He remembers when he arrived in this world and went to take the admission test for adventure. That classic case happens where the main character makes a magic test in front of everyone and surprises everyone with his absurd power. I myself already brought about 5 animes with this same scene on the channel. When they discover that he was so powerful, he decides to look for a spell that would limit his magical power and finds one like this in the middle of his range of spell. I don't know if this has happened in the past or in the present, but it doesn't matter either. What matters is that Tina says something was wrong. It didn't make sense that they walked so much in that region and didn't find any monsters, but Yuji says that's why their slimes were killing all the monsters they found. Their slimes then warn him that there was something wrong in the sky because he suddenly turned purple and the moon turned blue. The scene cuts with a strange guy full of armor wondering what that color was in the sky. The priest, yes, the same one that was sent there by the central, appears and asks this guy he calls boss if he knew what that blue moon was predict. He replies that he didn't, but that there was a legend written in a book that said that this moon indicated a calamity, and while he spoke these words something fell from the sky towards the earth. This something turns out to be a gigantic dragon that with a roar makes everything shake, or just the camera shook, I don't know. The two appear watching the book he referred to before, and they see that in the description of this legend there was a picture of a dragon, the same one that appeared. They decide to retreat to the Valley of the Wind, and Yuji asks his slimes to go ahead and open the way for them, defeating them all the monsters there, and that's what he does. Yuji gets the information that the coast was clear, but maybe not so much because they finally find the earth dragon that was hiding, well, under the earth. Yuji says that he would try to face him and tell the two to hide. He starts the fight and it seemed that his attacks were not having any effect against him, but in fact everything was calculated because what he wanted was to spread a lot of dust for when a strong gust of wind came. After all, there is the Valley of the Wind. The earth dragon would have his vision obstructed, giving Yuji the opening to use the magic he wanted to finish the fight. That is exactly what happens, and after defeating him they return to the Adventurers Guild, surprising the girl at the reception for having defeated. They also deliver the leader of that wanted gang and receive their reward for the 2 complete missions. After that guy in which the priest called the boss calls the protagonist saying that they needed to talk. He takes him to a meeting with other people saying that he in the case. Yuji saw the dragon up close and asks Yuji to talk about how he was. Yuji uses a skill to transfer his thoughts into drawing so everyone can see the dragon's appearance. The priest says that they found information about this dragon in the Book of Legends where it said that in the past the dragon appeared and managed to destroy an entire continent alone in 3 days, being stopped by a divine emissary with power that could rival the gods. The guy with the eye patch, called Ryled, then says that there is a theory why this dragon appeared now. He explains that 30 years ago when there was an event where the moon and the sun completely aligned, a ritual was performed so that 30 years later, in this case 1 week ago at present, a warrior was summoned to this world to end an imminent catastrophe, but there was no evidence that the ritual worked, and he thinks that this ritual may have attracted the dragon. But it did work. It's Yuji. His slimes communicate to Yuji that the dragon has increased in size, and he communicates this to the general of the meeting. The Ryle then says that they should not just stay there waiting for the worst and they would attack the dragon with everything they had. The scene cuts with him having dinner. The priest appears there and calls him to a private place to talk. He introduces himself and gives a mysterious dagger to Yuji, saying he doesn't know anything about it. Through a screen, Yuji discovers the name of the dagger and its peculiarities as being unbreakable and gathering the user's magic. He asks the priest why he was giving it to him and he just replies, because the divine wanted something like that. I don't remember. I just remember that after that he was lying down thinking about the battle and received a message from his slimes warning him that the dragon had grown even bigger. The scene cuts with Yuji riding his wolf going to where the dragon was. He uses a fire attack on a large scale because fire was his weakness, but nothing happens to him. He retaliates by throwing a ray through his mouth Godzilla style that Yuji defends with a barrier. His slimes notice that he got even bigger than before, and Yuji has the idea of concentrating that same powerful attack that didn't work on the dagger he received from the priest because it concentrates magic power to later release with greater damage. That way he would defeat the dragon more easily, or that's what he thought, because after managing to reach him with a sequence of jumping magic, sticking the dagger in his eye and throwing the magic at close range, he thinks the fight is over, but soon takes a tail from the dragon that throws him away, hitting everything in the way. To make matters worse, he notices that he lost more than half of his HP and his mana was in the red. While receiving a blast of laser beam from the dragon, he makes a bet using sacred magic that was also included as his weakness, and luckily this attack works, leaving the dragon all bewildered. Yuji then ends the battle by jumping on the dragon's neck and using that powerful fire magic once again while cutting the dragon's neck, thus finally managing to defeat him. For a moment the camera focuses on something shiny that was left with some dragon blood. The scene cuts with Yuji waking up and being received by Ryled, who warned him that the heavens had returned to normal and also said that the priest, he said that a certain someone defeated the dragon and that he knew this information through the word of God. He also mentions that the priest left after Yuji asked where he was. By the way the conversation ends, Ryled knew that it was Yuji who he had defeated the dragon and says that whenever he needs the guild would be available to help him. The scene cuts with him talking to Tina and Lisa, who warn him about his team being disbanded. They ask what he would do now and he replies that he was going to live in a new city. He asks for a recommendation on where to live and they say that the city of Ricardo was cozy and had good food. He asks if there weren't any sky-changing colors or dragons there just to show off, and the scene cuts with him leaving the city. However, his journey is interrupted when one of his servants, Dryad, calls him to the place where he faced the blue dragon, saying that now that place was home to several wonderful mushrooms and he wanted to his help to collect them since she couldn't do it alone. She explains that she would use the mushrooms to make potions of life and magic. However, after Yuji helps her to collect all the mushrooms and she uses one of them to make a potion of life, she complains about having given too little. And not knowing the reason, Yuji says that it must be because the water was not distilled, so he makes a system that allows this to happen. He says that the color of the potions reminds a lot of those magic stones used by the Vision from the beginning of the anime, and that makes her remember when the two met and he saved her from monsters that were in that stone. He asks why it looks so much like the stones, and she replies that probably the stones were fused with the grace of the dragon, a special type of power that can only be found at the location of a fallen dragon, and their powerful magic is what gives life to these mushrooms. After explaining the potions of life and magic are ready and she gives it to Yuji. He and his monsters then travel towards Ricardo but end up having a detour due to the intense fog and will stop in a village where all the residents were acting strange, like the Ganados from Resident Evil 4. Clearly suspicious behavior. The leader from the village seemed insistent on inviting Yuji to eat something, but he's saying he wasn't hungry, refuses to eat. Looking out the window he sees everyone who was smiling, looking at him with an ugly face. The leader explains that it's because they are used to visitors and ask where he was going, and he answered. He then decides to leave and asks the name of the village. As he leaves, the scene cuts with the village leader talking to someone strange and saying that an adventurer passed by. Apparently he was a religious fanatic of the same ilk as the guy who caused the incident with the monsters in the city at the beginning of the anime, because he said that the next day he would extract the grace of a dragon to clean this contaminated world. The scene cuts with them arriving in Ricardo but seeing that everything was covered by snow, saying that this situation was not normal.